Lena Lawson woke up with a gasp, bolting upright in bed as the sunlight sliced through her broken blinds. "No, no, no, no," she shouted, grabbing her phone. 9:03 a.m. Her train to Chicago had left 3 minutes ago. She flung off her covers and scrambled into yesterday's jeans, dragging her duffel bag out from under the bed. "I can't believe this," she muttered, tossing on a wrinkled sweatshirt as she yanked open the door to her tiny studio. She had one shot at this. If she didn't make it to the interview by 4 o'clock, she'd lose the biggest opportunity of her life. Outside, the New York air was sharp and cruel. She darted down the steps of her walk-up building, almost tripping over her own feet as she raced toward the subway to get to Penn Station. By the time she got there, the boards showed exactly what she feared. Her train to Chicago was long gone. Lena dropped her head into her hands, breathing hard. She'd saved for months to afford that ticket. This interview with the Whitmore Design Group was her one chance to finally get out of waitressing and into the interior design world she'd dreamed about since college. And now, gone. "Miss, are you okay?" She looked up, heart still hammering, and blinked at the voice. The man standing in front of her looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine's sharp navy coat, tailored pants, and a face too handsome to be real. His dark hair was swept back, and his clean-shaven jaw looked like it had never seen a cheap razor. He had the kind of presence that made people stop talking. "I missed my train," Lena said, trying to laugh but failing. "It was important, really important." He glanced at the departure board. "Chicago," she nodded. "There's no refund, and the next one leaves in 4 hours, but I can't afford another ticket, and I don't have time to wait." He looked at her for a few seconds. "Come with me." "What?" "I have a car waiting. We'll get you on a flight." "You'll make your meeting," Lena blinked. "What? No, I don't even know you. I'm not getting in a car with a stranger, even if you do look like you own half of Manhattan." He smiled, not arrogantly, but like he was genuinely amused. "I don't own half, just a few pieces." "My name's Nolan Whitmore." Her mouth dropped open. "Wait, Whitmore?" "As in Whitmore Design Group," he gave a short nod. "That's the one." Lena's brain short-circuited. "I'm supposed to interview with your company today." "Then it's a good thing I showed up." She stared at him, still half convinced this was a dream. "Why would you help me?" he shrugged. "Because you look like you fought hard for this shot." "And because I can." Before she could argue again, he gently took her duffel bag off her shoulder and gestured toward the exit. "I have a car outside. Let's go." Still stunned, Lena followed him out through the crowds. A sleek black town car waited at the curb, the driver already holding the door open. Nolan helped her in, slid in beside her, and within seconds they were speeding down 7th Avenue. Inside the car, she tried not to stare at him, but it was impossible. He was calm, focused, like this kind of thing happened every day. Meanwhile, Lena couldn't stop fidgeting with the zipper on her hoodie. "You don't have to look so panicked," he said, glancing over. "You're going to make it. I don't understand why you're doing this." He shrugged again, his tone casual. "Maybe I like helping people who don't expect it." She narrowed her eyes. "That's not it. You've got that look." "What look?" "The one that says you're used to getting your way," he laughed quietly. "I won't deny that." They arrived at a private airport, not LaGuardia, not JFK, but something smaller. Lena's jaw dropped as she stepped out of the car and saw the jet waiting on the tarmac. "You've got to be kidding me." Nolan turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Do you want to make your interview or not?" Still half in shock, she let him guide her up the stairs. Inside, the plane was pure luxury cream leather seats, polished wood everything, and the faint scent of expensive cologne in the air. "I've never been on a plane like this," she said under her breath. "You get used to it," Nolan replied, taking a seat across from her. "You've got about 2 hours. Relax, you'll be ready." She stared out the window, then back at him. "This is insane." He leaned back. "Maybe. But I don't think I've ever done anything more worth it." By the time they landed in Chicago, Lena's nerves were on fire. Nolan had ordered food on the plane, actual food, not peanuts, and made her eat, even while she practiced answers to interview questions. He didn't once mention his role at the company again. Instead, he asked her about her work, her ideas, even her design aesthetic. "You've got something," he said as they pulled up to the Whitmore Design building. "Don't let them scare you." She turned to him, suddenly unsure. "You're not coming in," he smiled. "No, I'd rather they judge you for who you are, not because you showed up with me." Lena gave a shaky laugh. "You're really not what I expected." That amused look returned. "Neither are you." She hesitated at the door. "Thank you." "I mean it." "Good luck, Lena Lawson." She stepped inside and didn't see Nolan again for the rest of the day. The interview went better than she ever imagined. 2 hours of presenting her portfolio, explaining her design ideas, and answering rapid-fire questions. She left the building floating on adrenaline and confusion. Because no matter how well it had gone, her mind kept drifting back to that man with the navy coat and the private jet and the quiet smile. But she didn't know that while she was being interviewed, Nolan Whitmore had been watching from the top floor. And by the time she stepped back onto the street, he was already making a call. Hire her, put her on the Carrington project. "She's fresh out of school," the HR director said. "I don't care. She's got vision. She's hired." And Nolan closed his laptop, leaned back in his chair, and smiled to himself. He hadn't meant to fall for her, but he had, and he wasn't about to let her disappear. Lena stared at the email on her cracked phone screen, standing frozen in the middle of her shoebox apartment. The subject line read, "Offer of Employment, Whitmore Design Group." Her heart galloped in her chest as she scrolled, eyes skimming over the words, "full-time position, competitive salary." Assigned to the Carrington Hotel renovation project, she sank onto the edge of her bed, the springs creaking beneath her. It didn't feel real. Just 48 hours ago, she was scraping together tips to afford ramen. Now she was being offered a dream job on one of the city's most high-profile design projects. The Carrington Hotel was no ordinary renovation. It was a historic landmark, undergoing a complete transformation under Whitmore Design Group's elite team. And somehow she was being placed on it, despite half the firm's staff having years more experience than her. There was only one explanation, Nolan Whitmore, but he hadn't contacted her. Not through HR, not through email, not even a note. Nothing. Lena rubbed her palm across her forehead, trying to steady her thoughts. She hated the idea of being handed something she hadn't earned. But she also couldn't deny how hard she'd worked, how long she'd waited for a chance. If he'd opened a door, it was up to her to prove she deserved to walk through it. The next morning, she walked into the Whitmore Design headquarters with her shoulders squared and her chin lifted. The building's lobby was all glass and steel, minimalist and cold, like it belonged in a museum. A receptionist with a headset and a voice like honey directed her to the elevator labeled Executive Projects. The doors slid shut behind her, and she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. Blazer borrowed from her roommate, hair pulled into a bun that kept slipping loose, and a portfolio hugged to her chest like a shield. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that felt like another world. The executive floor was quieter, the air thicker with the scent of polished wood and something citrusy. She barely had time to take it in before a woman with silver blonde hair approached. "You're Lawson?" the woman asked, not unkindly. "Lena?" "Yes. I'm Dana, Carrington project lead. Follow me." Dana walked fast, her heels clicking against the marble. Lena followed, absorbing everything. The scale models on glass pedestals, the mood boards with swatches of velvet and brushed brass, the whiteboards covered in sketches of Art Deco motifs. They stopped at a long conference table where 3 other designers sat. Dana gestured to a chair without breaking stride. "You'll be handling spatial flow and guest suite aesthetics. Your first assignment's the penthouse floor. You've got 72 hours to submit a preliminary concept." Lena blinked. Me. You're on the team." "But that part's yours. No hand-holding, no training wheels. Either you sank or you swam." "I'm ready," Lena said, her voice steady even though her stomach twisted. Dana nodded once and walked away. One of the designers, a man in a vest with tortoiseshell glasses, leaned toward her. "Don't take it personally. She threw me into a ballroom redesign my first week." Lena let out a breath. "Did you survive?" "Barely. But hey, welcome to the big leagues." Over the next 3 days, Lena barely saw daylight. She lived off vending machine coffee and granola bars, sleeping in 2-hour bursts when she wasn't sketching or researching vintage architectural details. Her fingers were blistered from working with foam board and X-Acto knives. But by the deadline, she'd created a full concept with 3D mock-ups and a pitch that made her proud. She delivered it to Dana with a calm she didn't know she had. That night, as she left the office close to midnight, she stepped into the elevator and froze. Nolan was already inside. He looked up from his phone, and for the first time in days, their eyes met. "You've been avoiding me," he said simply. Lena stepped in, her pulse unsteady. "I've been working, I know. I saw your concept. You went through my files. I own the files." She folded her arms, leaning against the elevator wall. "Why did you put me on the Carrington project?" "Because you're better than half the people on my staff. And because I wanted to see what you do with the chance." She narrowed her eyes. "And that had nothing to do with the fact that you flew me here on a private jet." He didn't flinch. "What if it did?" The elevator stopped, but neither of them moved. "I don't want to be a favor," she said. "You're not. I don't want to owe you." "You don't," Nolan said, his voice softer. "But I'm not sorry I helped you. I don't regret it, not for a second." Lena looked down at her shoes, then back up. "You're my boss. I'm a lot of things. Boss is one of them. But I'm not going to lie, I've been thinking about you since that morning at the station." "Why?" Nolan stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that her breath caught. "Because you said no before you said yes. Because you didn't fawn or flatter. Because you made me." "Curious?" Lena's voice was quiet. "And what happens if I say I'm not interested?" "Then I'll respect that, but I'll still think about you, probably too much." The elevator dinged again. She stepped out first, her heart pounding. He didn't follow. The next day, she found a sealed envelope on her desk. Inside was a single page, approval for her concept, signed by Dana. And beneath it, a note in Nolan's handwriting. "You earned it. No strings." Lena stared at the paper for a long time, then tucked it into her portfolio. She didn't know what this was, but she knew it wasn't over. Lena stared at the Carrington penthouse model, fingers hovering over the brass-trimmed panels she was adjusting. The late-night hum of the design floor whispered around her printer's whirring, soft tapping of keys, the distant echo of a phone ringing unanswered. She hadn't left the office in nearly 12 hours, but she didn't notice the ache in her back or the growing hunger in her stomach. Her mind was fixed on one thing, making the penthouse suite feel like more than just a hotel room. It had to tell a story. "I thought you'd at least go home after the approval," a voice said behind her. She turned sharply. Nolan was standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his jacket folded over one arm, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "I wasn't finished," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "Approval just means I'm allowed to keep going." He walked closer, taking in the model. "You added recessed lighting under the cornice. It's subtle. Warmer than the original plan. It softens the room without washing out the detail." His eyes moved from the model to her. "You see things most people don't. That's kind of the job." "No," he said, voice lower, "not just in design." She held his gaze, the air suddenly thick between them. "You can't keep doing this," she said finally. "Showing up without warning. Dropping compliments like they mean nothing." "They do mean something," he said, stepping beside the table. "But if you want me to back off, say it. I will." Lena looked down at her hands. "I don't know what I want." "Then let me help you figure it out." She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped away from the model and grabbed her coat. "I need air." He didn't try to stop her, but when she reached the elevator, he followed. They ended up on the roof. It wasn't fancy. Just a flat expanse of gravel and tar with a short barrier around the edge and a maintenance shed in one corner. But the view was breathtaking. The city stretched out around them in every direction, lights flickering like stars. the river a dark ribbon far below. Lena leaned back against the railing, arms crossed. "I used to come up here when I was younger," Nolan said beside her. "Before we expanded this floor, it was the only place I could breathe." She glanced at him. "Why would you need to get away? You run the place." "Not back then. I was just the founder's son. Came here after school, watched the designers work, listened to the meetings through vents." She hadn't heard that before. "So you didn't always have a corner office." He chuckled once. "I wasn't even allowed to touch the drafting tables. My father believed in hierarchy. You start at the bottom or you don't start at all." "Is that why you noticed me?" He looked at her. "Part of it, the rest." He hesitated. "I didn't expect you to get under my skin." "But you did." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, unsure if it was the wind or the confession that made her shiver. "I don't want to lose this job," she said. "You won't. Not just because you say so. I'm not offering you protection, Lena. I'm offering honesty." She glanced sideways at him. "And what do you want in return?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. "Time. A chance. Nothing more than what you're willing to give." She turned her face toward the skyline. "I've never had someone like you offer me anything without expecting something back. Then let me be the first." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant horns of traffic and the rustle of wind against the rooftop equipment. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking over this whole empire?" "Every other day," he said with a crooked smile. "But then I remember why I stayed." "Why?" He looked out beyond the horizon. "Because I wanted to build something better than what came before, not just for clients, for people like you. People who create." Lena's throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to her, not without hidden meaning, not without strings. She pushed off the railing and walked toward the stairs. He didn't follow this time, but before she reached the door, she stopped and turned. "If you ever use your position to make decisions for me again without telling me, I walk." "I understand," he said, "and if you're serious about this, whatever it is, it doesn't happen here, not at work, not in front of anyone." He nodded once. "Agreed." She opened the door and disappeared down the stairs. The next morning, there was a note on her desk. Not typed, not official, black ink, heavy paper, dinner, no expectations, just conversation. She stared at it for a long time before tucking it into her planner. She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no, either. 3 days later, she showed up at the restaurant, not some 5-star palace with valet service and chandeliers. A quiet, tucked-away bistro in Lincoln Park. He was already there, seated in the back, phone off, jacket draped over the chair next to him. When she sat down, he looked up and smiled, not the confident, calculated smile she'd seen at the station. This one was slower, warmer, almost hesitant. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure either." They ordered wine, talked about nothing. The weather, the food. A ridiculous article about a man who tried to build a hot tub out of a dumpster, and just like that, the pressure eased. She laughed. He leaned in. The candle between them flickered as the distance closed. By the time dessert arrived, she'd forgotten the way he'd changed her life in a single day. He was just Nolan, and she was just a woman trying hard not to fall too fast. But when he reached across the table and touched her hand just once, something in her chest shifted. She didn't pull away. The Carrington penthouse was nearly finished. Lena stood in the center of the vast space, her eyes moving slowly across the room. The custom wall panels had been installed, the layered lighting she'd fought for had been wired precisely, and the velvet chaise she'd sourced from a boutique in Milan had just been positioned by the windows. She could see it now, what the space was meant to become. Not just a room, but an experience, a story told in textures and light. Footsteps echoed behind her. "Careful," said Nolan, stepping around a crate of antique sconces. "You're starting to look like you belong here." Lena didn't turn. "I do." The quiet held for a beat, and when she finally faced him, something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "I've been asked to present the final walkthrough to the Carrington board," she said. He nodded. "You'll do it." "I will," she answered. "Alone?" "I assumed as much." She studied him, gauging his expression. You don't mind. If you weren't ready, they wouldn't have asked, and if you weren't capable, you wouldn't have accepted. She moved past him, brushing her hand over the marble bar top. I thought you'd push back. I've learned better, Lena paused. You're not the man I thought you were when we met. And what kind of man did you think I was? The kind who solves problems with money. Who doesn't hear no? And now, I think you still hate hearing no, she said, glancing over her shoulder, but you don't ignore it. You listen. Even when it makes everything harder. That's because you made me want to. She didn't respond, but her hand lingered on the bar a moment longer before she walked toward the terrace doors. Outside, the view swept across the skyline buildings stretching toward the clouds, traffic winding through the streets below like veins. The wind caught the hem of her coat as she leaned on the stone railing. Nolan joined her but didn't crowd her. I got an offer, he said. She turned slightly. An acquisition bid from a Dubai firm, one of the largest in the hospitality business. They want Whitmore Design to expand internationally, start with Paris, then Singapore, then wherever they see growth. Would you still be in charge on paper, but not really? They'd bring in their own team. Streamline the brand, rework the project priorities. Lena's jaw tightened, so they'd gut it. They'd elevate the name, but the soul would go. You're not going to take it. I was tempted. For the first time in a long time, I thought about what it would be like to let go. She turned to face him fully. And I realized the only thing I actually wanted to let go of was being alone at the top. The words were quiet, but they struck deeply. Lena stepped away from the railing and crossed to him. I've spent my whole life trying to get into rooms like this, she said. Trying to be the kind of woman who gets noticed for her work, not her voice or her clothes or how well she smiles. You are that woman. I don't want to build something with someone who's halfway out the door. I'm not, Nolan said. Not from the company. And not from you. She studied him, her expression unreadable. I don't need saving, Nolan. I know that. And I don't want to be distracted. You're not. But I will wait until you're ready to stop running. She laughed once, incredulous. I'm not running. You are. From everything that scares you, including this. Lena stepped back, folding her arms. I know what this place has done to women like me, she said. The whispers, the questions, the assumptions. If I let you in and we fail, I'm the one who gets flushed out. You'll be fine. I'll be the intern who slept her way onto Carrington. No one will say that, Nolan said. They will, she snapped, because that's how this world works. He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small black case. I wasn't going to do this yet, he said, opening it. Inside was a single brass key. She stared at it, speechless. It's not an apartment, he said. It's not a proposal, it's just a space, a studio on the east side near the river. Good light, quiet, yours, no strings, no expectations, her voice caught. Why? Because you need a place that belongs to you, a place where no one can question how you got there. I can't accept that. You already did the second you made this penthouse look like a living thing. She closed the box gently, her hands trembling. I don't want this because I'm with you. I'm giving it to you because I'm with you. She looked at him, then really looked and saw the man who had waited patiently while she built her own name inside his walls, who had stepped back when she needed space, who had chosen her talent over his pride every step of the way. I'm presenting the penthouse tomorrow, she said. I'll be watching. From the back, from the side, he said. Close enough to hear, far enough to let you shine. Lena held the box against her chest. If I fail, you won't. She turned back to the terrace and took a long breath. The next afternoon, Lena stood before the Carrington board in heels that pinched and a suit tailored just enough to make her look like she belonged. She clicked through slides, answered questions, fielded challenges. And when the vote was called, the room nodded in her favor. She didn't cry. Not until she stepped out into the hallway and saw Nolan waiting at the end, a single white envelope in his hand. I had something drafted, he said. A press release announcing your promotion, but I think you should write your own. She took the envelope. Promotion, lead designer, he said. Permanent, full portfolio control. Lena blinked. You're serious? I'm not in the habit of joking about titles. She stepped closer. Why now? Because you already earned it. I just needed to catch up. She looked down at the envelope in her hand, then back at him. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. Of me. Of what this could be. He reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers with a tenderness that made her breath catch. Then let's not waste another second. Later that night, they stood on the roof of the Carrington, the city glowing beneath them, a bottle of champagne between them and nothing left unsaid. Lena leaned her head on Nolan's shoulder, her voice soft. You know, if I hadn't overslept that day, I would have found you anyway, he said. Eventually, somehow, she smiled into the wind. You really believe that? I do. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. Then let's build something that lasts. And with the city stretching wide before them, they did. The Carrington grand reopening was set for the following Saturday, and Lena had barely left her new design studio for more than a few hours at a time. The space Nolan had given her not given, she reminded herself, but earned had become her sanctuary. There were still unopened boxes of fabric samples along the wall and a vintage drafting table she'd found at an estate sale that she refused to let anyone touch. The studio had a view of the river that washed golden in the afternoons, and she often found herself pausing just to breathe it in. But tonight was different. Tonight, Nolan was taking her somewhere. He hadn't told her where, only that she needed to wear something formal and be ready at 6. When she stepped outside, he was waiting beside a deep green vintage Rolls-Royce, wearing a 3-piece charcoal suit and cufflinks shaped like compass roses. You remembered, she said as she slid into the car. Of course I did. You said a compass is the only thing more honest than a person. The ride was quiet in the calmest way, no tension, no uncertainty, just the low hum of the engine and the sound of the city shifting into dusk. When the car finally stopped, Lena turned to see where they were, but Nolan stepped out and opened her door before she could ask. They were in front of a building she didn't recognize. All stone columns and wrought iron balconies, tucked behind a tall hedge of ivy. What is this place? She asked. You'll see. He led her inside, where a soft-spoken woman in a velvet jacket guided them through a long corridor lined with oil paintings. They stepped into a small theater, not just any theater, but a preserved 19th-century salon with red velvet seats and a crystal chandelier overhead. A string quartet sat on a raised platform, tuning quietly. I rented it for the night, Nolan said, watching her reaction. She turned to him slowly. Why? Because the first time I heard you talk about design, you described it like music, how rooms should have rhythm. How light should rise like a crescendo. I wanted to give that back to you. She sat beside him, overwhelmed but quiet. No one else was in the room, just them, the musicians, and the flicker of candlelight on the walls. When the quartet began playing, she didn't recognize the piece, but it didn't matter. It was beautiful, layered and tense, then soft and sweeping. Like the last few months of her life set to strings, when the final note faded, Nolan reached into his coat pocket. Lena's heart paused. He didn't pull out a ring. Instead, it was a folded piece of architectural paper. She opened it slowly. It was her sketch. The Carrington penthouse drawn entirely in his hand. You copied my design, she asked. No. I memorized it. That's impossible. You forget how long I've been watching you work. She looked up at him, eyes shining. I want to build something with you, he said. Something that lasts longer than a penthouse or a project. Something with a foundation. She touched the edge of the paper, her voice quiet but steady. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to design our life, room by room. Lena leaned in, resting her forehead against his. Then don't ever try to draw without me again. Your proportions are awful, he laughed, pulling her into a kiss that felt like a promise. 1 week later, the Carrington reopened. The press swarmed the entrance, flashes popping as guests in floor-length gowns and tuxedos posed beneath the restored Art Deco arch. Lena stood near the side of the lobby, watching it all unfold, her work, her team's effort, every inch of it finally alive. Dana approached with a champagne flute in one hand. You did it, she said. We did. Dana paused. You know, I've seen a lot of designers come and go. Most of them burn out before they hit 30, but you might actually outlast the marble. I'll take that as a compliment, Lena said. Good, because I don't give them often. Nolan appeared beside her, slipping his hand into hers naturally, as if it had always belonged there. They didn't pose for the cameras. They didn't need to. The story was already written in the details. The way the penthouse captured warmth in every corner, the way the team spoke Lena's name with respect, the way Nolan looked at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. After the gala, they didn't go to a party. They went home, to a brownstone near the river, not too far from her studio. The walls were still bare, the furniture mismatched from both their old lives, but the windows opened wide and the light poured in like it belonged to them. They made dinner together, burned pasta over salted sauce and mismatched wine glasses. I have something for you, she said, stepping away from the stove. Nolan raised an eyebrow. Another key. Better. She handed him a wrapped canvas. He peeled it back slowly, revealing a painting her first in years. A soft, abstract composition of light and movement, the Carrington skyline at dusk. I didn't know you still painted, he said. I didn't. Until you. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. You changed everything, he whispered. They danced barefoot in the kitchen, the music coming from a tiny speaker, the night stretching out like an open blueprint. Weeks turned into months. Lena's studio flourished. She hired her first assistant, landed her first solo commission, and got her name featured in a design magazine's Ones to Watch list. Nolan stepped back from daily operations, choosing to focus on mentorship and long-term strategy. He let others take the stage, and it made him more powerful than ever. They traveled to Florence, to Kyoto, to Morocco, each trip a new palette, a new inspiration. And in the spring, on the steps of the brownstone, Nolan asked again, this time with a ring, no audience. No fanfare. Just a quiet morning, the smell of coffee in the air, and the woman he never thought he'd find standing barefoot in his shirt. Lena said yes. They were married in the garden behind the brownstone, with only their closest friends and a canopy of ivy overhead. Nolan wore his compass cufflinks. Lena carried a bouquet of wildflowers and wore her grandmother's locket. They exchanged vows they wrote themselves, nothing borrowed, nothing rehearsed. Just promises made between two people who had built something real, something lasting. And as they danced under the string lights, hands intertwined, Lena leaned in and whispered, "We're just getting started." And they were.